Hey guys, welcome to Hip Hughes History. My name is Mr. Hughes and this is Noam Chomsky, and we deliver lessons on the internets. That's right. We're about to teach you the very basics about the Cuban Missile Crisis so you can get through the next dinner conversation without looking like an idiot, or maybe you got to throw down an essay, or you're studying for a test, or you just like learning. I don't care. Let's go. Giddy up. All right, let's start first with geography. So if you look at the map really quick, obviously Cuba, really close to the United States and the Caribbean, 90 miles from the shores of Florida. So if I'm writing about the Cuban Missile Crisis, which occurs in October of 1962, I'm going to start with geography and talk about proximity and closeness. And then I'm going to backtrack, go back in time. Let's go, watch. And suddenly we're in 1823. In 1823, James Monroe warns Europe with the Monroe Doctrine to
stay the hell away from my side of the globe.
Dog piss in the hood. We're really trying to mark our territory and claim kind of the Western Hemisphere as our hood, as our side of the globe. Fast forward. Spanish-American War. In 1899, the United States engages Cuba through Spain in the Spanish-American War. This is really a war of imperialism. It's a whole nother lecture. But in order to understand the Cuban Missile Crisis and the communist revolution in the late 1950s in Cuba, we need to understand that the Cuban people had lived under American imperialism after the Spanish-American War for upwards of 50 years. So we're controlling trade and their foreign policy and their economics. So that's going to be kind of the context for the beginning of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Start with the Monroe Doctrine, and then talk about kind of the Spanish-American War and imperialism, and then we're ready to go. So fast forward to 1959. After 60 years of imperialism, the government of Cuba, which is a nationalistic kind of pro-American government under Batista, is overthrown by the revolutionary, the communist guerrilla, Fidel Castro. And Fidel Castro is going to make an alliance with the Soviet Union. And you have to remember, context, man, that this is occurring during the Cold War. So this is provoking a giant fear in the United States. What's going to happen now that Russia is in our backyard and violating the Monroe what? You learned something, the Monroe Doctrine. So giddy up, what are we going to do? So in 1959, we had a Republican president, Dwight Eisenhower. So Eisenhower puts into motion a CIA plan, which will be known as the Bay of Pigs, which is designed to use Cuban exiles that were, from Cuba, send them back with American support to overthrow Castro and, revive the Monroe Doctrine and get these commies out of our backyard. And then JFK's elected. So JFK is faced with a tremendous decision when he takes office in 1961, January, whether or not to go with the Bay of Pigs. And under pressure, he decides he's doing it. The Bay of Pigs is a tremendous disaster. He also authorized a program called Operation Mongoose, and it's a really complicated CIA program, but basically they tried to kill Castro, and Castro knew this, and the Soviet Union knew this. So knowing them, what are they going to do? And, I think there's another part of this. They also, I think, see Kennedy kind of as weak. He didn't back up the Cuban exiles in the Bay of Pigs. In 1961, the Soviets build the Berlin Wall, I think testing the young president, and he really doesn't do anything. So I think his youth and his inexperience on the Berlin Wall and the Bay of Pigs really is showing Khrushchev, the leader of the Soviet Union, now is the time to play our hand. So they're going to do something that's going to mess everything up. So if you're Khrushchev, if you're the leader of the Soviet Union, and you know our policy is containment, and you know we tried to invade, and you know we're trying to kill the leader of Cuba, what's your best move? Their best move is to get nukes on the island. Now, if you compile the contextual ideas that I just laid out for you, and you kind of understand that JFK is really young, and Khrushchev has seen JFK falter with the Bay of Pigs. He's seen JFK not react strongly when they built the Berlin Wall in '61. He's going to make his move. So in the summer of 1962, he begins to install ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, pointed at the United States under our noses. So, the Cuban Missile Crisis, let's get to this. It's MAD. MAD stands for mutual assured destruction. And this is a policy that basically is going to come down to nobody's willing to die. Nobody's willing to press the button. So, in 1962, in October, to be exact, this is October 15th to October 28th. It's called 13 Days in October, right? We discover the missile sites. A U-2 flight, not the band, but a plane high out of radar range, takes some snapshots, and we find out that the Soviet Union is putting missiles on the island. So JFK has to react. What is he going to do? Let's find out. His first reaction was actually to invade the island. Not many people understand how close to the abyss we were. He had generals underneath him. LeMay, who was the commander of the Enola Gay and dropped the bombs in Hiroshima, was still around. He was yelling for invasion. Voices all around the Joint Chief of Staffs were saying, you need to invade. You cannot let the Soviet Union putting missiles into Cuba, because that throws off mutual assured destruction. Mutual assured destruction only works if both sides have enough time to react. And if you have missiles in Cuba, geez, that's pretty damn close. Now, we have missiles in Turkey, so the Soviet Union would counter by saying, hey, we're only doing what you're doing. But nevertheless, we're ready to invade. Guys, I'm serious, man. We had the airplanes ready to go. And then actually, it's kind of a neat story, and I'm going to keep it really short, but in one of the last meetings before the invasion, or kind of making that final decision, the secretary, the former foreign ambassador to Moscow, his name was Tommy Thompson, was sitting at the cabinet table. I want to say he was a cabinet member at that point, maybe interior or something like that. And he had known Khrushchev. So he made the statement with Kennedy and everyone kind of sitting there, don't invade. If you invade, you're pushing Khrushchev to the wall and you're going to start World War III. If you give Khrushchev a chance to save face and get out of this, he'll do it. So the decision is made rather to invade, to blockade. To blockade. This is the regent's answer, the answer on the final exam. So the blockade begins the kind of standstill. We can see these Soviet ships and the American ships kind of facing off at each other, no one really knowing what's going to go on. What was really going on was backdoor negotiations. And in those backdoor negotiations, a deal is finally going to be struck, and then I'll tell you the surprise. So look, at the end of the day, even though at the end of the crisis, I believe on the 27th or the 26th, the Soviets shot down a U-2 plane, and that kind of escalated everything, cooler heads prevail. And here's the deal. And you're going to get some people in the United States that are going to be really upset with this deal, because part of the deal is we're not going to invade Cuba again. That's what the Soviets got out of this. We agreed never to invade Cuba, and we agreed to dismantle some of our own ICBMs in Turkey and Italy, which are really close to the Soviet Union. But the Soviet Union agrees to do what we wanted, which is get the missiles out. So, kind of everybody saves face. But the communist regime is going to remain in Cuba. And Castro, he's still ticking. He's not in charge anymore, but he outlived Eisenhower. He did JFK, LBJ, and then after LBJ, he went through a Nixon. Then he went through Ford and Carter and Reagan and Bush 1 and Clinton and Bush 2 and now Obama. And I might even miss the president. That's a long time, guys. One more thing. So the last thing, and one other answer I've seen before is we created a phone line between the Soviet Union and the United States, kind of like a hotline where we can talk to each other to avoid, miscommunication that could have ended in war. And you might say, like, maybe we wouldn't have had a war. Maybe we would have invaded and kicked out Castro and gotten communists out of there right away. But what nobody knew at the time that we know today is not only were the missiles being put together, the missiles were put together. Hey guys, if you wouldn't mind, if you can hit subscribe below, right? I want to live like an EDU gangster. I want to live off YouTube forever until I'm like 120, and I can't do it unless you subscribe and you keep watching new content. So please, pretty please.